Good morning, friends. Uh, UFO Journal 2017, Part 5. And about 5 in the morning, just back from the usual explorations and continuing on. The incineration, and it has been described as such, the high temperature incineration of the bodies in the apartment building in London left it very difficult to estimate the number of dead. And as we know, as we follow the case, and I would like to report that, well, it's not the opposite is true in spirit rescue, but it is quite a different story. And I did not personally participate in this astral plane rescue, although I've done so in the past, and the so-called past, and I'm familiar with the various types of situations with fires, floods, tornadoes, landslides, earthquakes. And many of you have also done this, whether you remember or not. And I was prompted by, on the morning of the disaster, an email from a friend who reported that a family member had dreamt that they had taken part in this. And it seemed like a classic case to me of someone who has a dream of looking after someone else who is injured, badly injured. And like a rescuer, like a nurse, like a rescuer. And I've come across, I get this reported to me all the time, and people have these memories and wonder what's really going on, and I will email me and ask. And as I say, and as I've said before, many of you participate in this with barely a memory of doing so, although some of you have small memories. And I would suggest to you right now that the snapshot of memory that you recall, if focused on, if meditated on, will expand into a series of snapshots, which will expand into a small movie. And if you wish to, and if you have the time, obviously people, it's Sunday morning right now. If you wake up on a work day and you haven't really got time, that can be an issue. But if you do have time, practice that, and you will find things expand. The more you put the spotlight on something, the bigger it gets. In the same way that if you worry about something, the more it becomes something to worry about. You know, it's the same process. I'm not asking you to worry about stuff. God, no. We all do that enough as it is. Anxiety and worry, well, you can put that aside. But it's the same process. Exactly the same. You focus on it with intent, exploratory curiosity, educational intent, it will expand. And you don't have to do it the next morning, you can do it later in the day, although I agree the memories fade and it gets tougher. But it's not impossible, not by any means. And also, if you wish to maintain your status as a well-balanced, psychologically, emotionally being rooted on the physical plane, you may not wish to do this. I understand why you would want that, to retain that balance, but in the expansion of consciousness, in the inner journey, you have to give up your attachment to that balance to some degree, and you'll have to decide how much of that attachment you want to give up. But you will have to give up some of it in order to explore your greater self, and your greater self is that being that's out there doing things. So with the intense fire, as I've reported several times on YouTube over the years, going right back at least to the Mumbai shooting of 5, 6, 7 years ago, the various astral plane guides, people that are, permanent residents as opposed to those of us that project when we're asleep, um, have foreknowledge of such things in a variety of methods. And if it's a terrorist shooting, then it's some but not all of the guides of the perpetrators that know the intent and the plan and are kind of waiting for it to unfold to see if it will unfold, and are ready to do so when the final decision is made, because not all terrorists are 100% convinced that they're going to do what they do. Some of them back out, some of them blow themselves up, yada, yada, yada. There's a variety of options that can occur. People lose their nerve. And but if they carry through, there are many guides ready to participate, because there are some that are watching all the time. And that's one of their jobs, and they don't mind doing it at all. They don't wish to interfere with anyone's free will or karma, but they can act like, the traditional notion of the bad angel and the good angel on either shoulder. And the jihadists and any warlike people, I don't want to just pick out one group here, have those who are on their side, those who think it's right to be doing what they're doing, who feel oppressed, who feel like freedom fighters, etc., etc. And they will often be, not often, not always, the dead jihadists, already dead jihadists, who kind of get sorted out and go, oh yeah, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to be, I'm going to help out here. Some of them don't. They go to some version of the heaven world and either enjoy it or don't enjoy it or are disappointed. There's a variety of situations there. And then there's guides that are not ethnically or psychologically or ideologically connected to the fight, but who are connected to the well-being of humanity and the lessening of suffering on all fronts. And that's just out of the goodness of their hearts. That's not about an ideology or being a good guy or being a bad guy. It's just helping out. It's, like passing out the plates of, macaroni and cheese at a picnic, just there to help out, right? Because that's what they want to do. They want to be of service. And, but they don't interfere with karma. Although they can still put loving thoughts into somebody's head. They can say, well, is it really worth it blowing all these people up? Maybe, there's all the kind of thoughts that they can put in, but they don't sort of prevent. There is always the free will to do this sort of thing. And, that's the basic keystone, keynote of the planetary experiment is free will. Choosing to do good as opposed to doing it because it's in the rule book. Talk to many religious people who will agree with this. And you have to choose to do, the right thing. And because if it's just handed to you on a plate, it's not really a choice, is it? So anyway, but with quote unquote natural disasters, and this is hardly a natural disaster, where one can see even, now the neglect over the years has contributed to this fire. And similar to others, perhaps even worse. But anyway, the guides were there. I have this past few hours visited the astral plane medical location where these people are being cared for. And these are permanent locations, and they're always there for any kind of a disaster. A ferry going down, or a flood, or anything at all. They're always there, just like hospitals here, and they're ready. And these people were being cared for. They're let me give you a retro view here, because I wasn't there at the time of the fire. This is a backwards in time retro view, based in a meditation that I did in the hospital-like setting on the astral plane. The opening of the fire, the smoke, etc., the heat, the alarm as people are running around banging on doors. There are many spirits in that building. right then trying to alert people in any way they can. Some of them do partial manifestations. A partial manifestation is you dreaming somebody's, bugging you, or a child is dreaming, and comes running to the bed going, "Mommy, mommy, I had a terrible nightmare," or whatever. Guides will do anything to get you awake in that situation. If the nightmare thing's going to work, the ugly monster scaring the kid and gets them out of bed, they'll do it. They're experienced at these things. They can do the angel, they can do the playmate, they can do all sorts of things. They're good at this sort of stuff. Doesn't always work, but they're experienced. So a lot of that's going on. I can see it right in my mind's eye right now. As I say, I'm being given a retro view. It's almost like watching a video. Somebody's walking around with a camera going, okay, there's that guy there, there's one down the hall, there's one, So plenty of guides. They knew this was going to happen. They watch for such things, watch for many things that are more guides and beings that you might call angels floating around doing us good all the time or trying to do us good. Than you can imagine. I know about these things and I don't doubt it, but it's a permanent state of affairs. So it's not something I get terribly excited about because it's there, it happens, it goes on. I preach to the choir, as you know. I don't go to a convention of atheists and try to convince them that this stuff's going on. Although I did a fun talking to Christopher Hitchens, as you will all know. But expanding the small knowledge that many people have is much more worthwhile to me than banging on the wall of ignorance and denial. That's to a large degree that's a wasted effort. Others would disagree, but that's how I feel. So anyway, many guides, permanent astral plane residents, dead people. Although I'm not saying there aren't any projectors there, but we're kind of like the second wave that come on, because obviously people are sleeping around the planet all the time, and in Australia, people that are in the other part of the world from where, say, I am in North America, and when I'm sleeping, and other people like me, we're kind of like doing a shift, if you like, and people in, say, Australia or Japan, where it's the other time, they're out there doing it, and it's the communication is telepathic. A Japanese person can understand what's going on if they're a guide out there doing it, just as I can. When I was one I've written about is it was an earthquake in Iran some years ago, and it really hit an ancient city where the structures were weak. I forget the name of the city, but it was pointed out in the news. And many thousands of people were displaced in this, and quite a number were killed. And believe me, I didn't have any trouble communicating with people that spoke other languages, just telepathic thought. And you probably heard this or experienced this yourself. The miracle of telepathy when you're out there doing the work. You don't need to know the language. So any number of guides from any number of ethnic backgrounds could have been there. Although undoubtedly there would be many English ones there. And we all work together, and it's a team effort, yada, yada, yada. And so be assured that all that was there. And people faint, the physical people, the victims, they faint, the smoke inhalation, they pass out. And a number of, if you've read a variety of NDE reports at all over the years, you'll know that some people have experienced, and will report this through mediums later, that they were plucked out of their bodies before they actually, quote unquote, died or felt the impact of whatever was going to happen. And guides are good at this. Some, not all, pluck you out of your body. Take that, everything out of you except the physical body that's about to be either hit by the truck, hit by the train, burnt alive, etc., etc. There is an ongoing tendency to minimize suffering, and as there is on this plane, in terms of minimizing pain, managing pain, it's all the same impulse. And it works on the other planes. So while I'm not saying nobody suffered, what I am saying is many of them were plucked out of their bodies before the horrific effects of fire and smoke, intense fire and smoke, got to their bodies. So if you're thinking on this, meditating on this, worried about this, be assured that as much was done as possible to minimize suffering. And looking at the remains and thinking about what fire does to physical flesh is the wrong way to go. Um, People were, many people were, I can't give you a number, plucked out of their bodies. Spirit's telling me vast majority, okay? Some people are terribly afraid and can't be plucked out of their bodies sometimes. They get, a little bit of that. But try not to think of the incinerator and the metaphor that one of the personnel has used and reported in the papers. I saw it myself yesterday, because it's destroyed the DNA, turned things to ashes. We're down to medical records at this point, we think. And try not to meditate on that and prolong your suffering by worrying about it. Many of these people were plucked out of their bodies. Of course, the psychological damage is another story, but they're in a hospital being cared for. I mean, really being cared for. People are there all the time. People, not necessarily relatives if there's relatives there, dead grandfathers, etc., etc. And as much is being done as is possible. So be assured that that is happening. While we have, exercise or, whatever inalienable right to be angry at bureaucrats that didn't do what they should have done, and people that thought more about budgets and their careers and whatever. It's all going to come out in the wash, and I don't wish to be pointing any more fingers than are already being pointed. So I checked that out, and I thought people will want to know about this. And I think that's basically all we need to know. Things will be accounted for, and the lost names will come up, and people that they thought were there that weren't there, well, that will be all sorted out. And onward we go to the next, and let's face it, London and England has been suffering much sort of, you want to call it karma if you like, I don't know. Obviously the terrorist operations were, I shouldn't say obviously, it seems to me they were done by people that had an agenda, who thought that agenda was righteous. But that's the nature of agendas. You don't get an agenda unless you feel righteous about it. And everybody in Libya, and Libya is one example, Syria is another, and there are others. They all feel righteous. No matter what side they're on, everybody's righteous, and that to me is the plague of righteousness, and it's afflicted mankind for a long time, and it shows no signs of letting up. The plague of righteousness. So we can't seem to get away from it, can we? And so I already covered the sort of rescue operations and refugee camp scenarios on the astral plane, close to the semi-permanent war sites and civil war sites where there's a constant stream. And I would say it's also, oh yes, I knew, the drownings in the Mediterranean, the ongoing drownings. It's second and third tier headlines these days, but it's still going on. And God bless the naval people from the various countries, out there every day trying to save people. And we, I come across figures, every few days to suggest, it's still going on in the hundreds, the old drafts and the leaky boats and et cetera, et cetera. And those people are all monitored and cared for as they drown in a similar method that I expressed to you. Drowning can be a lot slower, as you know, hanging on to bits of wood and slowly having water in your lungs. It's not fun. And it takes longer to get people out of their bodies. And the anxiety and terror is, ramped up. So, but there are many, guides floating around in those situations. It's not, there's rotating teams of them, and you can be hovering over a raft for, coming back and seeing how they're doing. Are they going to get across? Is it going to, these things can be quite well monitored by rotating teams of, permanent astral residents and those of us who are asleep and projecting. And it's been like this for a long time. The earliest book I read was Marilyn Hughes, I think. Did I get that right? I read that in Average Folks in the Afterlife some while back, and that was done in the 90s. And there's various indications in the memoirs of individual mediums that talk about such things much, much earlier than that, going back 100, 150, 200 years. They're personal memories, and they're a little spottier and don't quite get the team effort, although Charles Ledbetter's Invisible Helpers does capture this, and that's going back well over 100 years, 100, 120 years perhaps. So watch for that one if you're interested. Charles Ledbetter, Invisible Helpers. It's easily available. You can download it, no problem. And good insight into how this sort of thing was done 100 years ago, mainly by theosophists, people that belong to the Theosophical Society. Although I don't think they'd want to put their brand name on it particularly. They, don't have that agenda. And points out the even in that time period, 1905, 1910, the turn of the century, the organized nature of what was going on, and bringing people up to speed from maybe they would be, many more people were practicing Christians then, and would assume that angels would be participating in these matters, and they weren't wrong. But what they didn't know was that people meditating and asleep projecting were also participating in an organized and focused fashion. And so it was appropriate for the day. I'm not sure how well distributed the book was, but it was out there. And I'm sure the Theosophy was a worldwide movement in those days, bigger than it is now, I believe. So people did find out. Those who wanted to know found out. As now, although the internet helps greatly in these matters. So floods and drownings. As I say, the process takes more patience because with old leaky boats, you never quite know when they're going to go under, right? They might, they're starting to go, oh, no, they're not. And, this sort of a thing. Whereas with the fire, it's really happening fast, as we all know at this point, if you've had a glance at the papers or the news. But as you suspect or know, the time sequencing hanging around isn't that difficult for spirits. I mean, obviously, they're going to wake up and, go about the permanent astral residence, but it's a team job. And you can arrive at the site and somebody that's been there for a while will say, oh, yeah, hi, come on over, go over there. And, that kind of stuff, that kind of effort. No grandstanding. People just do what's necessary. And onward it goes. Understand. As well as disasters, tragedies, there is the normal passing through and from the planes, babies being born, sick and old people dying. it goes on all the time, every second of every day. And it's important to, I think it's good to focus on that and remember that. There's a constant traffic. Now, even our busiest train stations in the biggest cities are only busy between, 6 in the morning and 12 at night sort of thing. There's usually not stuff going, all the time that I notice. If I'm leaving a Toronto's Union Station to come back to where I live after a concert at, 10, 11 o'clock at night, there's not that many people there. I mean, there are still commuter trains going, but compared to the morning and afternoon rush hours, it's it's a trickle. So if you can use the image of the train station or the airport's even better, I think. And they tend to shut down, there's noise bylaws, between about 12 and 5. And just to exclude that period, the traffic of the, souls being born, souls dying, is constant. And just try to imagine how many spirits and guides are involved in that interaction. Constantly. And there are, I would say, more angelic guides, people, helping, assisting in birthing and assisting in the formation of a fetus. The Theosophist Jeffrey Hodgson had written about this in great detail many years ago. I haven't read from his book, but and others have. The construction of bodies. Obviously, there's an automatic sort of growth function going on, but there is guidance and adjustments and whatnot. And as you know, perhaps from reading the past life regression books, between life regression, people will, souls will recall expressing intention, ambition in the formation of bodies to give themselves challenges in the upcoming incarnation. People choose their afflictions in order to learn from them. And that's not to say things don't go wrong by accident, quote, quote. We could spend a number of years determining what exactly is an accident, but there is a fair bit of intention here. And this has been established. I don't think I'm making any new point there, but it seems appropriate to bring it up now. And the soul does choose certain afflictions or difficulties or challenges, etc., etc., just as you might choose a certain type of parental situation or upbringing in order to challenge you in a certain way or in a variety of ways. So, and there are guides and angelic guides that will assist in those matters, not just talking to you about your choices, but actually sort of assuring that the body does or does not grow in certain ways. And it's a complex matter, and it works on a DNA level. It works on an actual, that finger's kind of short level. It works on a number of levels. And I don't know if there's any point in going into more detail on that, but at the moment, but understand that is the case. And just tie that in with this constant traffic, which I think is important to focus on once in a while. This constant between the planes. It never stops. Never, ever stops. Not for a second. And when I joke about normalizing relations between the planes, that's one of the metaphors I like to use. I mean, this is extremely normal. This is not out of the ordinary. This is not a strange aberration. This is what happens all the time and has happened. Okay, so there was less people on the planet thousands of years ago, but still there was enough. It was a busy little spot. And it always has been. And it's just what we choose not to think about, choose to ignore, choose to let religion throw a veil over. Um, there's a lot of belief system ignorance on these matters. And as we move on the inner journey, it's important to take off those veils and become more knowledgeable and to become more understanding. Um, and I suspect that's fairly obvious to those of you who've been following along, but I just wanted to mention that. I think, well, I've probably gone through that one fairly well. What else did I do? Right. Talked to a friend who passed a month or so ago, went to visit him. I think he's still living with, well, he's spending a fair bit of time with his physical plane family, mothers, grandmothers, grandparents, while sorting out where he's going to live. He was an artist, a long-time practicing artist, painter, sketcher, he loved a number of mediums. And I did do a contact with him just after he passed, my friend Roger. And I just thought it'd be nice to drop in and visit. I had before, after the first contact, and he's just as happy as he always. Well, I should say as he always was. Suffering from cancer doesn't make somebody happy, but when his transition came, and he was well ready to accept it, and is certainly enjoying his existence now, and communicated that to me and thanked me for the writings that I had done that he'd only recently become aware of. We hadn't seen each other in a number of years, and I guess the internet alerted him in some way. And but he had read philosophical and metaphysical books before, so he'd given this a fair bit of thought. And just one more happy camper on the astral plane. I tell you, there's lots of them, and enjoying his life in paradise, no question, and just sort of getting ready to get set up, exploring things. Would I like to live here? Would I like to live there? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? He was not rushing, but renewing relationships with those that passed on before him, and thinking loving thoughts of those he's left behind. And visiting. They always visit, whether you remember or not, but they visit, and they're grateful, and for those that cared for them, and he is too. And so a short visit with him, and also my friend David, who passed a couple of years prior to that. David's doing, yeah, I can see a big wide grin on his face even now. I visited him in his home, and he still has a lovely home, a small place as opposed to a fairly large house that he had here. And I'm not sure, there are some of his relatives and friends already over there. They're not known to me. I believe his parents are still here, but I shouldn't say I'm not that close to the family, but he's certainly well settled and enjoying his life. And it seems to be in a phase, he's been over 2 or 3 years, where he's considering his past incarnation and sort of, weighing and measuring and looking at how he handled certain situations. And did I do this well? Did I do that well? I was a little short on this one. I could have been more caring on that one. I'm sorry this happened. That sort of a thing that people go through their and see how they did. He didn't seem overtly judgmental of himself, although we didn't discuss it in detail, but he indicated he was thinking things over. And he's involved in creative activities. He was always interested in music and played a couple of instruments, and he's participating in that now. He plays in a band once a week, twice a week. And very much like you would do here. You go somewhere and you play and people watch, and things happen and people applaud. And he was fairly, he'd been an amateur musician, but he played for years. So he's certainly enjoying that. And his work on this world was involved with financial affairs and numbers, and the sort of thing you don't really doesn't have much need for in the astral plane. But he seems happy to give that up. It's sort of like the stock market, or he was good at the detail behind merging companies. The paperwork, all that kind of stuff. I'm good at mergers, he said to me once. um, and he really enjoyed that. Um, and that's not so. There's not much need for that over there. But he has other talents and other interests, and he follows those. So very good to see David. He has a wonderful smile and a good joking sense of humor. And since he passed a few years ago, every once he visits me, we established a contact, and he was fairly grateful for a few things that I told him about the astral plane. Although I didn't know he was ill, he didn't tell me. But he absorbed the information all the same, and had given his character, several times he has visited me while I'm driving. I'll turn around and he'll be sitting in the passenger seat right next to me. My job involves I do a lot of driving, and he'll just be sitting there, sort of grinning and stuff. It's quite funny, and I go, "David, is that you?" Because I don't see him that clearly, and he goes, "Yeah, answer," and he just drop in. And other people are more circumspect and will, visit you in a dream or whatever. But David's quite the teaser, and he just pops into the car. He's done it, I'd say 3 or 4 times over the last few years, and I don't always recognize it. I think sometimes if I'm preoccupied in heavy traffic, I won't realize he's there. But just a small point, people like to be playful, and it's great fun if you can catch on to the joke. So let's see, what else did I do while I was out there? Obviously, I'm coordinating my activities to these little talks, or some of them. One can't get into everything. I didn't think I did any talks like I was mentioning to the free thinking liberal Christians that I was talking to last episode. Let's see, what else did I do? I visited had a few moments to visit the garden at the Anglican Church here in Oakville, St. Jude's, that I put a video up of recently called Church and Garden. There are many nature spirits in that garden, and I interact with them in a playful, fun fashion. They are I'll have to get into this more. They're nature spirits, and they're completely wrapped up in the natural world and providing energy and care for growing flowers, plants, trees, etc., as you may know. And the energy that I represent and can channel is quite different to theirs. And we've been interacting in a friendly, playful fashion for many years, as I pointed out in that video. And one of the things I can do for them is I can channel an energy that they can't channel. And it's sort of like a higher energy, and I just project it out to them, and it looks like a sort of sparkly light, and they bounce up and down, and sort of like playful kids when I'm doing this. And if I don't do it, they always want me to do it, and it's just laughing and giggling like kids playing with balloons and rolling around on the grass. I mean, that's essentially what it's like. And I used to do it when I was meditating years ago. I don't know, I can't even remember how I found out that I could do it, but I do. And they just love it. So, we interacted in that way, and they live in their natural world. They're not that concerned with what goes on beyond, especially the small, the tiny little fairies that look after the little plants. Devas that are more organizational and have more structure and responsibility. They tend to be more aware of things, but they're involved in the natural world, and that's their world. They're not that involved with humans, a little bit, because many people come and meditate or sit and read, or the people going to church, they're aware of those energies, and they're hyper aware of those energies actually. But it's a beautiful garden, so everyone that comes there is filled with admiration and love, and it's something to be grateful for. And a few people come depressed and have to think things over, and the nature friends feels kind of sorry for them and give them energy. Um, but that was a little playful episode that I thought you should hear about. And obviously, I live close by. It's easy to zip by, walk by, fly by, do anything, and just pass through and be interactive and be loving and be friendly and be happy. And one can do that with great ease. At least you could do it too. You watch that video, and I don't care where you live, you can project there using those images. That's one of the reasons I did that. And you can do it to that any park anywhere. This is a small park by a church, but just physical location proximity is not necessary for these things. If you're projecting and you wish to go somewhere, I'm sure most of you would rather go to Niagara Falls, which is like 100 miles down the road from where I live, and worldwide famous. And that is an exciting place to be in terms of energies and nature spirits and water spirits, and there's lots of them there. But just a small point, you can project. Use that video and project there. Not hard. Just keep the image in your mind. And which brings me up to the crop circles. One can visit those, and we will be doing that probably tomorrow. And we'll do a little examination of crop circles and what's going on there, because they go on every summer, particularly in England, where you can check those out on the internet, and it's been a good year so far. And we will explore that fairly soon. And until we do that, I bid you farewell. OBE Journal, Part 5.